Summer, 1943. Over northern France, German fighter squadrons fly their usual patrols. At the horizon, a strange silhouette appears. Slow, clumsy, yet somehow growing larger every second. What is that? One pilot asks over the radio. Looks like a flying bathtub. Laughter echoes through the channel. But the laughter dies when the strange aircraft suddenly climbs straight into the sun. And seconds later, a FW-190 bursts into flames. What they thought was a joke of a plane turned out to be their new, worst nightmare. The P-47 Thunderbolt, an American monster of steel built to rule the skies. When the United States entered the air war over Europe in 1942, its bombers could reach deep into Germany. But they couldn't survive the trip home. The British Spitfire was too short-ranged, the American P-38 too complex and unreliable. The US needed something tougher, a workhorse, not a racehorse. That challenge fell to Republic Aviation, who designed a plane that broke every rule, bigger, heavier, and stronger than anything that came before it. The result was the P-47 Thunderbolt, the heaviest single-engine fighter of the entire war. At nearly 8 tons, it looked absurd. Even American pilots laughed at it. How's that thing supposed to fight? Looks like a flying tank. But as soon as the first tests began, they realized the joke was on them. This flying bathtub could climb faster than expected, dive like a rock, and come back out in one piece. Its creation was a race against time. Every month without a long-range escort cost hundreds of bomber crews their lives. While Europe burned, engineers in New York built a machine. That would one day turn the tide of the air war. The Thunderbolt became the perfect symbol of the American way of war, power through industry, victory through endurance, and success through overwhelming force. The Thunderbolt was a fortress with wings. It was powered by a Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, pushing more than 2,000 horsepower, and a massive turbocharger that kept full performance even at 30,000 feet. It was heavy, but in a dive, nothing could touch it. German fighters that followed past 450 miles per hour would start to shake, their wings bending, their controls locking up. The P-47, however, could dive past 500 miles per hour and pull out like nothing happened. Its firepower was brutal, 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns, firing over 3,400 rounds in total. It could carry bombs, rockets, drop tanks, even rivaling small bombers. At low altitude, it tore apart trains, convoys, and tanks alike. Pilots called it the Jug, short for Juggernaut, unstoppable and unforgiving. German pilots mocked it as a flying tank or bathtub, but this tank refused to die. Armor plates surrounded the pilot, and engines' self-sealing fuel tanks prevented explosions, and redundant controls meant that even half a wing missing didn't mean the fight was over. One veteran said later, "Inside a Jug you felt invincible, like you were wearing armor made for the gods. It was rugged, simple to repair, and easy to mass-produce. A masterpiece of American industrial design. And when it came home riddled with holes, mechanics would just patch it, refuel it, and send it back into battle." In early 1943, the first P-47 squadrons appeared over France. The 56th Fighter Group was among the first to take them into combat. And they learned fast. At first, German pilots underestimated it. They tried to pull the P-47 into tight dogfights, but the Thunderbolt didn't play that game. When things went bad, it simply rolled over and dove. A vertical plunge so fast and violent that German planes trying to follow would literally tear themselves apart. A Luftwaffe pilot from JG-26 later recalled, "We chased it, and then it was gone. No fighter could follow it down. And when it came back up, it came from behind, or from the sun." One burst from 8 machine guns, and another German fighter was gone. Before long, the Luftwaffe learned to respect the Jug. They began to issue warnings over the radio. "Thunderbolts above, break formation." The sky over France was no longer safe, and every time that heavy roar echoed through the clouds, they knew the Americans were coming. By the fall of 1943, the air war had changed forever. American bombers were hitting deeper targets: Regensburg, Schweinfurt, Hanover. Losses were massive, but the P-47 changed everything. With new drop tanks, the Thunderbolt could escort bombers all the way to the target, and still have fuel to hunt on the way home. They hit Luftwaffe formations and climbed strafed airfields and pounded German supply lines. For many on the ground, the sound of that engine became a nightmare. A low rumble from the west meant the Thunderbolts were coming. Their attacks tore through trains, columns, and even fuel depots. A German officer wrote in 1944, "When the thunder came from the west, we knew the Thunderbolts were hunting again." For the USAAF pilots, the Jug became more than a machine. It was a guardian angel, a wall of metal that could take the hits and bring them home. One pilot said, "In a Jug you felt immortal until you saw the sky on fire." By 1944, the P-47's mission expanded. It wasn't just a fighter anymore, it was a fighter-bomber. Over Normandy and the Ardennes, Thunderbolts shattered German divisions before they even reached the front. Their .50 calibers and rockets left roads littered with burning armor. This was no longer a duel of pilots, it was a war of industry. And America's flying tank was winning it. By 1944, every German pilot knew the name Thunderbolt. Reports from JG2 described it as a large, heavy aircraft of exceptional durability, difficult to destroy, even with concentrated fire. They saw them flying with smoke trailing from the wings, still fighting back. One FW-190 pilot wrote, "I hit it 8 times. It didn't fall. I hit it twice more. Then it shot me down." The Luftwaffe, once the terror of the skies, now faced a machine that simply refused to die. The P-47 wasn't elegant. It was efficient. And efficiency was winning the war. For German ground troops, it became hell on earth. The Jug dove low, its guns ripping through columns, trucks, and bridges. They said you could recognize it by sound alone. And when you did, you ran for your life. By the end of the war, more than 15,600 Thunderbolts had been built. More than any other American fighter. They destroyed over 6,000 enemy aircraft and tens of thousands of ground targets. During the summer of 1944 alone, they flew over 170,000 missions. Later models, the P-47D, M, and N, became faster, tougher, and could reach nearly 1,000 miles. They were the backbone of Allied air power over Europe. And the Thunderbolt didn't retire when the war ended. It fought again in Korea, with the French in Indochina, and in the air forces of Brazil and Mexico. It outlived the war, and many of the men it once protected. Even today, restored Jugs fly at air shows, their engines still roaring with that same deep thunder. A sound that once meant death to some, and salvation to others. What once was mocked became the most feared weapon in the sky. The Germans were right. It wasn't pretty. But it was what mattered most in war. It brought its men home. While others burned, the flying bathtub kept flying, through smoke, fire, and bullets. A monument of steel and willpower. Proof that real strength doesn't need to look graceful. It just needs to survive.